This is the Hunt Quietly podcast. I'm Matt Ranella. It's going to be 35 below zero tonight here.
I know. I think other parts of the state aren't experiencing the heat wave that we are over here in the tropical city of Missoula.
No, one could be forgiven for thinking that the sun burned out. So how do you spend your days these days?
How do I spend my days these days? You know, it kind of depends on the day, I guess. I cook breakfast for my kids every single morning.
Wow.
Joy
How
to
many
me.
kids you got?
I got two. I got a 16-year-old and a almost 14-year-old.
Oh, so they're at that age where they're constantly suffering from some kind of caloric deficit.
Oh, especially the son. I mean, he's growing like crazy. He's got his metabolism is unbelievable. And I mean, he can ski all day, go to a friend's house, play basketball, whatever, and then come home and just be hungry and like bouncing off the walls. So
Yeah,
it's fuel him a lot.
Yeah, those are crazy times. I remember my brothers and I, when we were that age, we'd eat dinner and then be making peanut butter sandwiches 45 minutes later.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, that's like we'll eat total dinner. I'll make him have seconds, then he'll have dessert, then he'll still be hungry after that, right? So it's like, I don't know.
My dad always used to say that when the front door opens, the fridge opens.
And what's happening now is like he's bringing friends over. And so like the grocery getting is, it's getting a little bit more extreme because they come over and they just decimate things.
Yeah. And things aren't cheap right now.
No. But all that's going to be fixed.
I appreciate your confidence.
Hey, a little bit of humor, come on.
Your confidence in the powers that be.
Oh,
eggs or something are crazy. I keep hearing about how there's egg shortages. I don't really hardly ever eat eggs.
I hammer the eggs. The son hammers the eggs.
Okay.
I love them. And yeah, I mean, I think that's all bird flu related though, right? Like I think.
Yeah. Right.
Yeah.
Right. But as a beleaguered federal employee, I kind of think if I get canned, maybe I'll get some chickens and go into business.
What a crazy week it's been. Crazy week.
Yeah. So you make breakfast for your kids, then what?
Then I get sometimes I'll go work out. Like I've had the time to actually do a little fitness, which has been nice.
Yeah, you look ripped.
Well, I don't know if I'm ripped, but I'm down about
you look good.
50 pounds, which is good.
Oh, geez.
Yeah. So that's been good. And then I get to work, man. I actually wake up early, like between 5 and 6 o'clock and start like working. Then the kids get up around 6:30, make them breakfast, go to the gym, then get back from that. And then I'm working now, trying to figure out what's going on with, all things hunting and fishing at a federal level in particular, and just trying to figure out, what's the best way to let the people know.
Okay. How you okay, tell the people what the name of your organization is.
Yeah, so it's called American Hunters and Anglers, and basically a really small, nimble organization to hold politicians in Washington, D.C., elected officials and administrative officials accountable for actions that they take. And accountability can both be, thanking, and it can also be spanking. And so really what this is about is, I think we're basing it all on the North American model, Matt. And so that's, the Seven Sisters, which I think many people know about, and makes our life, I think, fairly easy as far as how we make decisions. And then letting people know. I mean, I think there's so much that's going on right now that like part of I think the job of American Hunters and Anglers is to, report the news. And then, when there's opportunities for action to, make that easy for them.
Okay, so several questions. The first one is who's working on it with you?
So there's a guy by the name of Barrett Kaiser who I've done work with now for a long time. If you remember, like the Catadine Woods over in Maine, it was proposed. I don't know if you remember this, but it was like
No.
it was it was proposed as a national monument. They were going to take away hunting opportunities like traditional uses. The local folks got pretty pissed, which they should, because they've been hunting this area for a long time. And so my friend Barrett got involved to kind of change that narrative and then also get like hunting allowed in that monument. And so that monument was actually designated. Um, under Obama, and then like there's hunting that you can actually do there, which is pretty rad. But so I'm working with him. He and I have been working together for a long time. There's a guy by the name of Kendall Van Dyke who ran against Roy Brown in a race in Billings. Roy Brown was a candidate for governor that lost to Brian Schweitzer. He's running in a Senate race against Kendall Van Dyke. He's a sitting senator. Kendall worked for Trout Unlimited, and Barrett and I got together and reconstituted. My father had started a state PAC, so the Montana Hunters and Anglers Political Action Committee, and so we reconstituted that, and that was kind of the first time we worked together. Amongst others, I worked. He used to work for Senator Baucus, and we worked a lot together on the Land and Water Conservation Fund. Actually floated the senator down the Blackfoot River, and which was awesome. But yeah, so he and I have been involved in kind of behind the scenes in politics here in Montana for almost 2 decades. And so now this is it was a national kind of it was a national organization that is kind of based on some of those things that we've learned from my experience in 25 years in the conservation community, and then his experience as well.
Okay. So how would you differentiate yourself from TRCP and BHA?
Great. So first of all, I think anything that we're doing is complementary. I think I would say that we're all going down the same river. We might be in different boats, but we're going down the same river with the same direction, kind of same destination in mind. But with American Hunters and Anglers, we're not going to have membership. We're not going to have corporate partners. And we are going to break some eggs sometimes. And I think that breaking some eggs is to really say the things that need to be said, that are going on, and then have other folks in the room that are going to be in the negotiating room. They're going to be making the omelets. And so I think there's a big difference there. I think another piece is we're just small and nimble. There's just a couple of us. It's a woman that's helping us with social media, and to me, that kind of without membership, without corporate partners, we have to worry about kind of all the caring feeding that happens with that, but we can also say things without worrying about pissing people off necessarily either. So
Yeah. Oh, I would say that if you don't have to worry about, if you're not going to fund yourself through corporate sponsors and memberships, that just opens up a tremendous amount of freedom to say what you really think.
totally, and I think again, this is all based off of the North American model, which is been around for 150 years and kind of been maturing ever since kind of Roosevelt and others started kind of the basis of that. And so, I think it helps us, that guides us, but at the same time, we're not beholden to really anybody. The other piece that I would say, I mean, that's a big difference, is that we're a C4. So TRCP is a C3, 501c3, which is a nonprofit. BHA is a 501c3, which is a nonprofit. We're a C4, which we're also a nonprofit, but where C3s are limited to 20% that they can lobby out of their total budget. A C4 can do unlimited lobbying, so we can talk about issues every single day and talk about advocating for those issues every single day without any fear of being on the wrong side of the IRS. And then the other piece is that we can get involved in elections. And so that's not something that we're, focused on yet, but it's probably someplace where we're going to go in a couple years during the midterms, and then ultimately in 4 years.
So you guys have a little bit, like your sister works for Montana Conservation Voters, right?
Yep.
So you got a little bit of that, like it sounds a little bit like that, kind
It
of.
is. I mean, I think, they have a C3 and a C4.
Okay.
So they bifurcate those two things. And, I wanted to do like kind of a national C4 for a long time. When I was at BHA, we did explore that. It was in our strategic plan. Ultimately, the board decided not to pursue that, which I understand. But, now I have the opportunity, since I'm not there, to really help carry that idea forward. And again, it's complementary to the work that they're doing, that TRCP does on policy, that Trout Unlimited, Ducks Unlimited. I think the entire community. It's just that we're doing it in a little bit different way.
Um,
Nimble, nimble. I would say heavy on media and then grassroots engagement.
how are you going to fund it?
So right now, that's a great question. This is like, I mean, it's one of these things. You go out and like find all the funding, so you don't have to look over your shoulder, or you just go establish something and go from there. And we looked at each other and said, let's just do it and bet on the come a little bit. So right now, I'm not getting paid. He's not getting paid. We got a little bit of money for that social media person. We put up a website, and then it's like individual donors right now from across the country, right?
Well,
I think
that'll be what it always is, right?
Yeah, I mean, I don't think it'll be any different, right? I think that,
I mean,
you know,
you've ruled out the other two alternatives, right?
yeah, oh, for sure, for sure. And so, like, it'll have to be individuals really that are giving us money. And I mean, sometimes you get some of that same baggage if somebody drops a bunch of cash on you. But I would say that we are beholden to the North American model and kind of our ethos and nothing else. And so, we'll have those conversations with, folks that are giving us $20 to folks that could potentially give us more than that.
If what your mission is clear enough, then you shouldn't get in trouble with the people that give you money.
No, you're exactly right. And I think just being honest with them, right? This is what we're going to do. I think sometimes, Matt, that people understand the mission, but then, you go punch somebody in the mouth. And I think, I can give you many examples of that just in the last month that we've done. And when you do that, sometimes that makes people nervous. And so I think we're going to be upfront with anybody we talk to that, like, listen, like, again, we're going to break some eggs, but we're going to break some eggs because it's the things that need to be said. And so that others can kind of be in the room and do those negotiations.
Yeah. Yeah. So what have you taken stances on that's been displeasing to the few people that are helping you out financially?
Yeah, well, no, nothing yet. I mean,
Nothing
everything has
yet.
been straight up. Yeah, I mean, I don't, I'm trying to, what I'm trying to say is I'm trying to avoid that, right? Have those
Yeah.
conversations at the beginning, and so that people understand. And then if they do have a question, then that's when you can have the conversation and be like, man, this is what we talked about, and if this is too uncomfortable from you, sure, that's great. But I
Hmm.
think we're not going to change what we do at all.
Yeah. I don't know. This seems like a good deal to me, and it seems like something I could easily support. You're not going to be tempted to do R3 because
No,
you don't have
that's not our job at all.
because you don't have corporate sponsors. So,
Don't have corporate sponsors. Don't have not going to have chapters. I think that like we're not going to have again like I think we'll have volunteers, and those volunteers will help us, I think do grassroots activities. They'll help us potentially with videos once in a while, from man and woman on the street kind of stuff, right? But other than that, like kind of, we won't be, I can think going down that path. And part of that is to not compete, with other organizations either. Do we need another hunting and fishing organization? I would say this is much different than that.
yeah, if I had to say, based on my limited understanding, what your efforts seem most similar to is TRCP.
I would say so. I think,
Do
but
they ever
heavy.
endorse candidates?
So like we have, so this, we're brand new, right? Like,
Yeah.
and so we have not gone through an election cycle at all yet. I mean, I think the big difference with TRCP is that we can get involved in elections. They cannot.
No, that's what I
Right?
said. Okay, I know you might have misheard me. I didn't say do you get. I said do they.
Yeah, no, they can't.
They can't. Okay.
They cannot legally. What
Okay.
the farthest the C3 can go. We're getting into the weeds a little bit, but the farthest
No,
the
that's
C,
fine. I want to hear. I want to learn a little bit about this, and I
yeah,
think the few people that listen to me wouldn't mind knowing a little bit more about that distinction as well. I didn't know that C3s can only spend 20% of their time and effort on lobbying.
yep, yep. So I think the what C3s can do, the kind of the line that they can do is they can do like candidate questionnaires, right? Like where they go out and ask all the candidates, let's say, that are running at a state level, federal level, exact same questions. and then they report the news, right? They can't say, okay, now that you've read this, like this is who we endorse. Like they can't go that far, but they can do that kind of candidate questionnaires. Or what they mostly do is just really, talk about where these folks are on issues. And as long as that they're doing that with like, let's say TRCP that works on like something that I don't work on that much, but is like ocean policy, let's say, right? And
Mm-hmm.
so as long as they've been very consistent on ocean policy and they're talking about Senator X or Representative X that wasn't great on that policy, they're not saying that that's a bad person, don't vote for him, but they can tell you about that issue, if that makes sense. Whereas a C4 can be like, hey, we've been telling you about how bad this policy is, and now we're going to tell you that this person is not somebody you should vote for.
Okay. You can be a little stronger.
We can be stronger and more direct, right? I think
Yeah.
that path, I think sometimes C3s, kind of getting to that line, but with us, there isn't that line. You do have to spend 51% of your budget on policy, and then the 49% can be spent on elections.
Okay. What constitutes lobbying? If an organization writes a letter to a politician, is that lobbying?
Yes. I mean, it kind of depends on what that letter says, right? So, like, if that letter says, you know, hey, we're, you know, organization X, this is what we do, this is who we are, that's just education. If that organization says, this issue is important to us, let's say clean water, but they're not referencing any kind of like bill that's going on or any kind of legislation, that's not considered lobbying. But as soon as you start talking about specific policies, that becomes lobbying.
So, boy, I'm gonna have to think about that because what else is there except on the ground projects?
I mean, again,
For a conservation, let me just say it
yeah,
in a more
yeah, yeah,
clean way. For a conservation organization like Backcountry Hunters and Anglers, where you have a bunch of experience,
yeah.
or you used to be the CEO, like what else is there? There's on the ground projects, and what would be constituted as lobbying, leaving the R3 out.
Sure.
What
I
else
mean, I
is there?
think that, yeah, I mean, I think, again, there's a lot of education too, right? And I think that education is different than lobbying. Like you can talk
Okay,
about, the issue. Let's talk. I mean, again, you could talk about the North American model for, in, all the time and not mention any kind of policy along with that. All you're doing is just educating about what that model is and where it came from. That would not be considered
I
lobbying.
see.
Yeah.
Okay,
Yeah.
okay, that makes sense. Um, yeah, no, this is great, and like I say, it's my little group struggles to find organizations to support, but this is one that we could get behind. Even ones that seem like we would support could support them. We end up not very full throatedly behind. Like I thought for a long time that the Nature Conservancy would be our jam, but we're very concerned about privatization of wildlife, and they lease out a lot of hunting land. So, and then you know that I absolutely despise hunter recruitment. I think it's the ultimate like betrayal of the hunting community. So that rules out a lot of organizations. But this organization sounds great. You know what it reminds me of a little bit is what your model reminds me a little bit of is Howl, but in it like you're more focused on political engagement, and they're more and like making people aware of threats to their rights as hunters and fishermen, so maybe I guess that's where the similarity ends, really, because they're not engaged with the legislature or anything like that. But it still is like an information campaign about issues that affect hunters.
Absolutely. I mean, I think people need to know what is happening, right? And I think that, I've got 25 years experience. My co-chair Barrett Kaiser has the same. And so we're like 50 years of working on this stuff. And so I think that, our perspectives is what we're really trying to get out there and report the news more than anything. Sure, there's going to be some, um, some of our own thoughts in that. And what I'm really trying to do, Matt, is like tie it into like history. because, I was Jim Poswitz was my mentor, and he just pounded like the conservation story into me, like any chance that he got. And so it's just like, it's once you know where this stuff came from, you understand that it didn't happen by accident, and it was like bold leadership that actually got us to where we are, and that it's only like 150 years old, the modern conservation of this country, and it could go away very quickly. Like right now, there is more pressure on our public lands, on our public wildlife, on our public water than I have seen in my 25 years. And I talk to people that have been around it twice as long as me, and they're saying the same damn thing. I would have to go back probably to when Roosevelt was setting aside the forest reserves that became the national forest, to like back when it was that bad. I mean, places, your home state of Michigan, when they were cutting all those trees down, like just raping and pillaging, right? Like knocking the whole forest down to like build Chicago, build Detroit, etc. Like that was when Roosevelt kind of stepped up and said, no more. Like we can keep cutting trees, but the way we're doing it right now is unsustainable. And that's kind of where this idea of conservation kind of came from. And then, he had the bully pulpit to not only take action, but I think to instill it as an ethos in America.
So when you say more pressure on public lands than ever, that's what you mean, is that there's more extraction and logging, and that's what you mean?
I mean, I'd say it's many different ways, right? So I think there's the pressure piece that you're talking about, right? I think that's like
That too, yeah.
one of the pieces. I think that, the
Hunting pressure is what you mean.
yeah. I mean, not
okay.
just hunting pressure, but I would say like
Recreational pressure.
Yeah. I mean, like those numbers are way up, as you know. And so I think that's pressure. I think that, the sale of public lands that we dealt with about, in 2017, like with Congressman Chaffetz and stuff, that comes back every 7 to 10 years. And right now it is back, and it's back with a vengeance. You got, the House changed the rules right when they came into Congress to make it so you didn't have to, when you are going to sell or transfer public lands, you don't have to consider the value of them monetarily when you're going through that sale or transfer, which is mind-boggling to me because these lands belong to all of us and they're worth quite a bit of money. Then you have the Utah, lawsuit where they tried to, petition the Supreme Court to just have, the federal government cede and give them, 18.5 million acres. You had 13 states that signed on to that. And so, while the Supreme Court said no, they also had $15 million that they're spending on like a PR campaign. Nobody does PR campaigns on Supreme Court like lawsuits. Like this is to change hearts and minds. And, 13 states signed on, so that's bad. Then you have, Senator Mike Lee, who is the chair of the Energy and Natural Resources Committee in the Senate. And, he has been probably public enemy number one when it comes to the sale or transfer of public land since he's gotten into Congress. And so now he's in one of the most powerful positions around public lands in that committee. And so I think that's scary. I think you're looking at, Wyoming legislature just tried to pass a resolution to take all the public lands in their state besides Yellowstone. So they wanted Grand Teton, but not Yellowstone. Same thing is happening here in Montana. Like that pressure for the sale is big. So that's number two, I would say, just the sale or transfer of public lands. Then the third is kind of what you talked about, is really this, when I hear energy dominance, like that is not good for our public lands or public wildlife or hunting and fishing. Sustainable energy development all day, right? Like that's where you're phased, thinking about how you're doing your development to minimize the impact of the resource. You're not just going in there and raping and pillaging and taking it all at the same time. Energy dominance means somebody loses. Energy independence, I think, is different, but energy dominance is where everybody loses or somebody loses, and I think it's us and the land and the water. So that, I think, pressure there. And then, I mean,
so energy dominance means we're going to get every little last chunk of coal and drop of oil we can, no matter what the consequences are.
That's the way I read it.
And this is just like, so this is like these two phrases, energy dominance and energy dependence, they're just infected with like a particular meaning. And one is, and independence is more like, we're going to take a light, we're going to be light-handed about it and do as little damage as we have to.
I mean, I think that independence is about, our standing in the world. Like when we're exporting a ton of like, of our resources, natural resources right now, like part of that, is the boundary waters up in northern Minnesota, where there's that proposed mine up there that there's now through executive orders back on the table. And that's a copper sulfide mine that's, I think it's a Australian company. Like we, the people of the United States, we don't even get any money out of what's taken out of that copper mine. And the money that they're making is going to Australia. And number three, like there's never been a copper sulfide mine that hasn't leached. And so you have the most pristine waters in the boundary waters that's a quarter mile south that leaks. It all flows north into the Hudson Bay, and it just screws that entire place. Now, should we be developing copper sulfide mines? Sure. I think they should be American companies. I think we should be getting some money off of them, the American people, and we should be doing them in places that are not as sensitive as the boundary.
Is that, yeah, right. No, that's like, that's pretty easy to be pissed about. One thing I've struggled to understand, I bet you could help me with this, is
Yeah.
what in these politicians' psyche makes them want to sell off public property? It polls poorly. Like the majority of Americans are opposed to it, so they must be so passionate about it that they're willing to take political risks to do it. So what is it? Is it just this feeling that the government shouldn't own land? Like, and where did they get that? Where did they start feeling so passionate about it? When they were a little kid, did their grandpa say we shouldn't own land and it just stuck with them? Like, where does it come from?
So I think there's a couple of things. First, I think it's about money, dude. Like it's like plain and simple, it's about money. And this is about people. I mean, Hal Herring, who I know I think he said that like, in the West, we're sitting on some of the most, like the most untapped wealth in like the world, right? That people like in particular, as our population continues to grow, they want to buy a piece of, their own land, and which I don't necessarily blame them. But, that's 640 million acres, which is the public land estate, the federal estate, that belongs to you and I and everybody else in America, which is freaking amazing and one of the main tenets of the North American model. But people want to privatize that. I mean, they really want to privatize that, and they want to privatize it to either make money off of it or have it for themselves. And so to me, that's kind of where this stems from, really, where this movement, I think, to divest public lands came from is when the Bureau of Land Management was basically established in the 80s. And there was a bunch of like public land that was unappropriated at that point, and they put it underneath the Bureau of Land Management in order to, protect that for the people or keep it in public hands. It was already in public hands, but as a different designation. And that's like when the Sagebrush Rebellion happened. And so I think, that's Nevada, Clive and Bundy kind of stuff. That's really where this started. And then the people are like, hell no. And then it goes away for a little bit. Then it comes back 7 to 10 years later. And then, it's like, it's about privatization. I think you hear some of this, we want control over the way these lands are managed and we can do it better, right? I think the states like Gianforte, it's a good example. Our governor here in Montana just came out after saying all the right things during the campaign when he's running for governor. Let's keep public lands in public hands. Let's keep it. He just today came out and said, well, actually, we'd like to transfer them to the states. And I will tell you that the Montana Department of Natural Resources sent out a memo this fall that they're going to start leasing state property to developers to develop that for housing. And then once they have the housing done and they've done the development rights, they'll get the ownership of that property and then they'll be able to sell it. So and I'm just reporting the news, right? And so this transfer anyways. So I think Gianforte sees that as a way for people to move into Montana and to have their little slice of Montana and make a shit ton of money.
He just thinks of it as economic development for the state.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Without, I think, keeping in mind, this $1 trillion outdoor economy, which I know you have problems with, but that's like the outdoor kind of economy, right? That's based on our outdoors. That's not just hunting and fishing.
Well, I don't have a problem with that. Like we'd have to get, if we wanted to talk about like what I have problems with. We have to get one notch more
All right.
specific. I can say some things that I'm clearly against.
Yeah.
Nonprofits doing hunter recruitment.
Sure.
I'm against hunting promotion of any
Which
kind.
I think, I listened to just the preamble of the podcast that you did with Jim like 2 episodes ago, and he was talking about hunter recruitment and when it's done for the sale of memberships and to sell products, that's definitely different than when I think about hunter recruitment. And it's a part and parcel of this conversation right now, Matt, is that as these pressures that we just talked about are put on our public lands, who is going to be the people that step up and actually talk about it? And
The
so
ninety percent, the 90% of hunters that don't belong to a nonprofit.
yeah, and that's I hope that, yeah, when I hope that they like step up, right? Like
That's what I don't understand is like
yeah,
the vast majority of hunters in this country don't belong to the turkey wild turkey National Wild Turkey Federation.
yeah,
Thank goodness, because that is like, I don't know if you've heard to our most recent episode, but that is like a very corrupt organization. Um, and I can tell you about that, or you can listen to it. But the things that they're doing right now are just eye popping, like the errors in their reporting, financially and in terms of the number of acres they can serve. But the vast majority of hunters don't belong to a turkeys, a ducks,
you're right.
elk. So
Right.
I this notion that you would like, oh, let's just take Joe Schmo off the street and turn him into a hunter, and then try to get him to care about conservation and access. I mean, it just doesn't. It just doesn't make sense. It makes sense because that's how these orgs fund themselves, by turning Joe Schmo into a hunter, for the in exchange for money from the hunting industry. Most of these orgs have just basically become patsies to the hunting industry. But it doesn't make sense if what you're truly trying to do is get conservation and access work done, because you already got people that are passionate about conservation and access. It's just a matter of engaging them.
Yeah, I mean, we can go down this rabbit hole for a little bit. I'm not here to like.
Oh, we don't have to. We don't have to. I don't need to talk. I talk about this stuff all the time. We can move on to some other things.
I mean, the only thing I would say to that is that recruitment, and when you do it right, and it's like I like to call it like high touch, right? Like this is not like you join an organization because you get a free knife, right? Like you like actually have conversations with these people. They hear the story that I've been kind of telling you a little bit about, like this conservation story, how we got the North American model. All of a sudden they're turned on and they want to do something about it. I think that kind of hunter recruitment to me is like essential for like stymieing, I think, some of these attacks on public lands, public wildlife. And I welcome that stuff. The other pieces, is like a different conversation. But I want to tell you that, like, in my mind, like we have to have the people engaged, or we can't fight this stuff. I mean, they're big, big policies and big, big energy that is moving this stuff. And all we got is the people, man. And if we don't have more people stepping up, then we are going to lose, all the things that we care about.
Yeah, I just don't think that hunter recruitment is the way to amass the political might you need to get something done. It's just you're not. You already have people that care about this stuff. Like, it just, like I say, it just doesn't make sense to me that we're going to turn people into hunting. And I don't really see where the R3 leads to advocacy either. I'd see, like, when I look at the chapter news and updates in the BHA journal, I just see more like R3. I don't see them, oh, we recruited them, now we're doing stuff. It's just more like the college clubs, or it's all bowling parties and ice fishing derbies. It's like, where the BHA certainly isn't providing a multitude of opportunities to fight the fight in the legislature. I mean,
See, I would disagree with you there. I mean, I think that's just my own experience, right? And I think I've gotten the opportunity to travel all across the country and see so many of these people that came to BHA, didn't know how to get engaged in this whole system. Now they are, and now they're standing up and testifying, in front of their state legislatures or in a committee, or they're, activating people to make phone calls. And so I think, again, my own experience, I've seen a ton of that, Matt, and it fills my bucket, I will say, right? Like when you see somebody that like is turned on and is like, oh my God, I can actually like engage in this process and I can actually, potentially get something my way. Like, man, that's like I don't think there's much better than that.
Oh, well, I don't think there's anything worse than going out hunting and having 20 people around me.
And I think,
I why, like, BHA has all this stuff about the importance of solitude on their website and how they value solitude, and then they do the opposite of solitude.
yeah,
Which is try to get more people out hunting and fishing. It's like draw odds have tanked in the last 10 years in the West. It used to be you could hunt in the West if you were a non-resident for elk, deer, pronghorn, mule deer, and whitetail every 4 years. Now every 2 years. Now average gross units is every 4 years. Nobody that does this R3 bullshit asked the hunting community if they wanted that. They just foisted it upon them.
Yeah.
Matter of fact, I tried to get Montana BHA to have a survey. Do you want to see more hunters when you're afield? And they wouldn't even ask the question because they can't, because it's going to piss off their corporate sponsors. And I had people tell me that.
Yeah, I hear you. I think that.
And what about the effects on wildlife?
Well, and I think
intense hunting pressure is horrible for wildlife. There's peer-reviewed scientific evidence about that.
Totally. And some of this is like regulations, right? Like here in Montana right now, if you get a mule deer, you get a deer tag, you can hunt anywhere. And as a non-resident, as a general, you can hunt anywhere, right? And so like Region 6, I think this last year was the first time that they had more non-resident hunters kill buck deer than residents, like, which is crazy to me, right? And so could you go to a system that's like this, you can only have so many in Region 6, so many in Region 2, so many in Region 3, and like that is based on kind of the availability. I mean, mule deer are in big trouble in this state, as you probably know. And how do we regulate that by still giving some semblance of opportunity, but what's best for the resource? And I think those
make less people want to do it. Yeah. Like I don't like the solution of let's constrict people more.
Sure.
I mean, it's coming to that, and it's got to come to that. But to me, a much less painful solution for society would be to stop generating interest in it.
Yeah, I think
it's like we got too many hunters, so we're gonna have to pare back, and you only get a tag every 2 years in this district or that, and it's a draw now, and we're gonna not hunt mule deer in the rut, and why not do away with hunting promotion?
Yeah.
Like that seems like a pretty good idea if it's over, if there's too much interest.
Yeah. I think, let's take like the Madison River, the Gallatin River, here in Montana, and like how it's just getting loved to death right now.
Mm-hmm.
Like they're having a hell of a time trying to figure out a solution there, because you can't take people away from that river now, right? Like, it's a found kind of resource. And so I think they're going to have to like come up with some kind of restrictions, something like they did on the Big Hole River. Here on the Blackfoot, they've been talking about, restricting some things too. So I don't have a silver bullet for any of that, Matt, but I understand what you're talking about. And no, that wasn't the main thing we want to talk about today, but I'm glad that we got into it.
Yeah. So tell me, okay, so one thing we're worried about for sure is threats of selling off the land.
Yep.
We got a version of that already that nobody ever says anything about. And that's like these leasing companies, like Land Trust, it's like, I don't understand how it is that these orgs that are concerned about public access don't say anything about these companies that are approaching landowners, lease and are making these um like lease agreements where we'll take care of the hunting on your place,
Yep.
and um you'll get some of the proceeds, and you'll share it with us. What, like that? Those programs are in direct competition with state-run programs that provide
Yeah.
or the WEHA program, the PLOTS program, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And I'm like very engaged in the fight to try to protect those nonprofits. My friends and I have started a nonprofit focused on showing appreciation to landowners that are enrolled in all those programs. We have chapters in Minnesota, North Dakota, Kansas, and Montana now. But
Awesome.
I don't know. That seems like something that like it just seems like something that the nonprofits would say. Like, don't book with these companies.
I think there's some that are, right. I think there's
Really?
yeah, I think there's the public land hunters that think that this leasing is out of control. I mean, the North Dakota piece is like a good one. They're trying to limit out of state waterfowl hunters right now because of this very reason.
No, I'm saying the nonprofits should say don't book with land trust.
I mean, they're not so land trusts are totally different, right? Land trusts are like the ones that
no, I'm talking about the company land trust.
Totally. These are big, they're big hunt operations that are leasing up big portions of the land. And then what's the one here in Montana? It's called well,
land trust is out of Bozeman,
okay.
But there's some other ones too.
Yeah. And so I think that, I mean, that's a privatization of wildlife in my mind. And it's really the state program, block management. What a way to kind of compensate landowners for the impacts. It's open to the people versus somebody's paying a lot of money and it's open to the few. And so I couldn't agree more with you that I think that it needs to be addressed. Is that block management is never going to be able to keep up with payments that those guys can give, right? So it's got to be about that relationship thing that you're talking about.
Yeah.
And the giving back and being part of the community, which I think, for traditional landowners around this country, I think that is much more of an easier conversation to have. I think when you have new landowners, they it's a way different conversation because they're not invested in that community as much.
Have you listened to our podcast about farm subsidies?
I've not.
So I don't understand why all the public money that goes into farms and ranches in this country, while there's not access strings attached to that, 20 to 50% of farm and ranch income has come from the taxpayer in recent years. We did some calculations in that episode. If we charged if the government charged the going rate on AUM rate, animal unit month rate, on landlocked public land in this country, they charge $1.35, and yeah, and it's worth about $19.50 right now, and $19.50 an AUM, an annual unit month. If we charged the fair market value, we would have something like 16. This is just for landlocked public land.
Yeah.
$16 million a year we could devote to access.
Which, I think that as we're looking at being more fiscal responsible, that is something that we should be discussing, is that rental rate in particular. I think I mentioned the 1872 mining law still on the books, is how we divvy out our hard rock minerals, so copper, gold, silver, etc. And we get zero royalties off of that.
Zero. Yeah, zero.
That is absolutely ludicrous to me, Matt. And those are foreign-owned companies, majority of them.
Yeah.
Majority of them. So this are our minerals, America's minerals. Like these companies are coming in and then like they steal our shit. We don't get any money for it. And then guess what? Then we are the ones stuck with like cleaning that shit up, right? Like
Yeah.
it's embarrassing that that's happening. I think that, in these conversations, hopefully, that we're having right now about, again, being more fiscal responsible, I think this is one of the things that we need to be talking about.
Yeah. Yeah. I just don't get it. Like, I don't know if you've ever gotten on one of these ag subsidy databases, but they're really well organized. You get on right now. If I'm trying to think of the one that I always use, but if you just type in ag subsidy database, you can get on right now, type on in any farm or ranch in the country, and see how many dollars they've gotten every year in subsidies going back to 1995. And it's staggering. Like it's your typical ranch in Montana, millions of dollars, and then so many of them go hire an outfitter on top of it. And I just don't understand why it's like, oh, you want a new pivot? You want another new $150,000 pivot? Maybe you have to have 40 hunter days or something like that. The world would be, I just don't see how you argue that the world would not be a more just place if there were access strings.
Yep. Yeah. And I totally agree with you. And I think it's South Dakota that has that for their like access program, is there has to be like habitat like engaged in that. And so like it's like kind of the opposite way of doing it. But like if you're going to participate in their access program, you have to be participating in some kind of like conservation reserve program or wetland reserve program. And so those things are combined, and so then the access and that conservation is combined. I mean, I think you could think about, there's that open field which is in the farm bill every single year, and open fields basically goes to money for block management for plot.
Oh, I think you're thinking of WEHA.
Well, so
the walk-in hunter, or not WEHA, I'm sorry, VIP HIP.
Yes,
voluntary VP voluntary public access habitat improvement program.
Right.
Yeah, I think that just got slashed.
It did. It did not get funded for this last year. But I helped work on that legislation when I was working for TRCP back.
Oh, okay.
So we called it open fields back in the day, right? And they called it open fields, and that money was for states that didn't have programs to help start them, and then states that already have programs to like supplement that, right? And so I think we could be investing more within the farm bill there. But I also think like this idea, I don't know what thresholds that would be. Like, is that acreage? Is that how much money? But if you're receiving so much subsidies or you have so much acres that you're putting into like conservation, how could we tie an access component to that, right? And I think at the same time, you could get those landowners enrolled in block management or plots or whatever the state program is, and then they can have the kind of their double dipping a little bit, which, I mean, I will say these subsidies keep these ranchers and farmers and in business, absolutely. And so and that's good for wildlife, that's good for like our our food security, etc. But how do we make that better? And I think that's something we could do for sure.
Yeah. I'd encourage you to listen to that episode, because we did a lot of research for that episode, and I think you'll find it illuminating. I mean, there's this misconception among sportsmen that this huge percentage of public money that goes to agricultural producers is conservation related, but that is the vast minority.
Oh, no, it's the smallest part of the farm bill.
Yeah.
I mean, the access program is the smallest part, but like
no. What I'm saying is
conservation title.
Like they think, oh, that's all CRP money or something like that. No, it's for stuff like pivots. It's for extremely highly subsidized crop insurance. It's for commodity controls. It's for disaster relief. The vast majority of it has nothing to do with conservation.
Yeah, food stamps. That's where food stamps come from too.
Yeah,
It's the
yeah,
farm bill.
yeah. So there's just these guys are getting a lot of money, and it's not for conservation. Some of it's for conservation,
Yeah.
absolutely, but
Yeah.
so I know, and so like that's like the argument I run into a lot. Well, how are you going to incentivize them to do conservation if you start attaching access strings to the money you're giving them? I'm like, my argument, my response to that is there's a lot of this money that isn't. It isn't conservation money to begin with.
Yeah.
That guy that wrote that book, uh, Right to Roam.
Remind me.
Have you read that book?
I don't think I have.
Oh, his thesis in that book is that we should have right to roam laws here like they do in
Oh, we used to.
really. Oh yeah, yeah,
You know that
yeah.
story? That's like when
He talks about that in this book.
stream access, baby. Like we got stream access, and at that point, that's when like kind of that right to roam kind of went away.
Oh, yeah.
That
He
was like
talks.
1980s, 85, maybe somewhere in there.
Okay. Uh, I'm just looking up his name right now because I can't remember. Oh, Ken Ilgunis. I interviewed him about a year and a half ago, but he was saying that the way they got right to roam laws instituted in some of these Scandinavian and European countries, like the political momentum came about just because of the things I'm talking about here, because there was so much public money going into their
Yeah.
agricultural lands.
Yeah, I mean it's a fine line too, right? Like I mean I think that the conservation practices in particular, you'll have some people say, well, then they're going to stop doing them, if they have to allow access. And I just think it's about building relationships and having conversations. I think, again, majority of
You could just exempt those. Say anything you do for conservation, there's no access strings associated with that.
yeah,
You still
yeah,
got
you're going bigger. You're
You
going
got
to the big subsidies. You're going to the big subsidies.
you still got 80 cents on the dollar. That's not for that they're
Yeah.
getting.
I mean, I also you want to go hunt a place that has conservation measures because they're going to be better places to hunt. Like if they're like farming from fence row to fence row, right? Like with no edge habitat or anything like that, it's probably not a place we want to hunt either.
No, no, for sure. But to me, those are two, the conservation component and the public access for public money component are just kind of separate.
Yeah. Well, let's in this next farm bill because they're going to be working on it. Let's go make sure that we get more money for conservation and more money for access.
Yeah. Another thing I'd love to see at the league. I'm not operating at. I'm not trying to change laws. I'm trying to change a few hearts and minds about some
Yeah.
things. But
Which is how you change laws, by the way.
yeah,
One of the,
solid point. Solid
yeah.
point. And do you know Nephi Cole?
Oh yeah.
He called me up a few weeks ago. He works for NSSF,
Yep. National Shooting Sports Foundation.
and he was all fired up. He thinks there should be a law. It's funny because I've said the same thing for a few years now that limits you to one elk a year across, like for the entire United States.
I don't know how you do that.
Oh,
just like reciprocity, and they keep track that you shot your elk in Montana, and so you can't shoot it in Idaho. I
yeah,
think,
there's to be some enforcement challenges for sure.
yeah,
But again, it would be a better world if that were the case. You wouldn't have these like celebrity freaking a-hole slob freaking hunters that have to shoot 6 elk a year just to generate enough content to keep their sponsors happy, and all the other things of like perverted hunting.
and I don't think that's the rank and file hunters that are going and killing 6 elk a year, right? Like one who has the freedom.
No, but it's who our young hunters wish they were. It's the role model. It's our role models.
Yeah, that's fair.
Yeah,
Fair.
like a Cam Hanes with 1.8 million followers. Like what he's modeling is what the next generation of hunters interpret as success. That's a huge problem in my mind.
Fine kind of piece of your message, I think, is, is along that lines. And that's like, how many can we take in how many different places a year, right? Like, I think, I mean, we're blessed to be living here in Montana, Matt, right? Like, like I'm not putting in for big game tags in other states because I have so much opportunity here.
Same,
You
same.
know,
We are. I agree.
and
And
so like,
and it's like people. I think this is changing now because I've been at this for a while, and people see that like it's the initial gut impulse was that I was just trying to protect my personal hunting. Which, if that's the case, this has got to be the dumbest possible strategy because I could take all the hours I devote to this stuff to Hunters for Access and hunt quietly, and I could do a little moonlighting and go get me a hunting lease
yeah,
with the proceeds. So it's like the reason we are blessed, and I still have good hunting every year, and I am thankful for it. However, the trend has been negative my whole life. I've never gone through a period where I was like, wow, hunting sure is getting better. And there's some parts of this country, I have a national perspective on this. There's some parts of this country where it's gotten terrible.
yeah. Do you think, I mean, I would totally agree with you in a lot of ways, but I also wonder if it's like, like what were the Native Americans thinking about, like when, like we were settling the West? Were they having the same conversation? Like, like the hunting, oh my God, this is just so, I mean, the buffalo. I mean, think about the freaking buffalo, dude. Like, I mean, this has been happening for a long time. So I just wonder if it's like those good old days. I would say in some ways, with some species, we are in the good old days right now.
And
Uh,
which ones?
I mean, waterfowl is pretty unbelievable right now. I think whitetail hunting is pretty unbelievable right now. Mule deer.
Yeah, yeah. If you can get access, yeah.
Yeah,
I
I
mean,
mean, I think
in
that's,
Montana, both those things are good right now.
when,
Absolutely.
and I'm in Western Montana. And so the waterfowl hunting for me is not amazing, but I mean, there's more birds now than, mostly for waterfowl than we've ever had.
Yeah, yeah.
And
Agreed.
that's really, I mean, full circle, that goes back to conservation, right? That means that we're protecting prairie potholes, like where they, in Alberta and North Dakota and South Dakota and Northeast Montana, like the duck factory, right? Like Ducks Unlimited and Delta Waterfowl, U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service, the state agencies, they've done a hell of a job protecting those wetlands, and that's one of the reasons why we got these ducks.
Yeah, I completely agree that it's a conservation success story.
Yeah.
No doubt about it. So when you're doing your research on a daily basis, what are you looking at?
I think right now it's really watching what's happening out in Congress, is for like our elected officials and then what's happening with the administration. So, I think it's me paying attention as us, the organization paying attention to what is affecting hunters and anglers and conservation in this country. And so it's, when I'm doing my research, that's just trying to figure out like, right now it's so much, right? I mean, Matt, there's been so much here in the last month. Like we haven't even been up that a month, but there's been so much that sometimes it's hard to keep track of, but really just trying to, you know, one, go with trusted sources, I would say like news outlets, but then also talking to people on the ground. And so I've been talking, with these latest kind of firings that happened last week of federal employees. I've been talking to a lot of people from across the country, both that are still working and then also that got fired. That there's a lot of people that don't know what's going on in that whole situation. I still think there's some unknown about the exact numbers of people that are being let go. I think there's more that are being let go this week, and so staying on top of that is really, talking to people inside and talking to people on the outside.
What do you do with the information once you get it?
I think present it to the people, right? Like I think, we found out like last week that those employees, I mean, well, step back. Like I knew with the proposed buyouts and then the shift in administration, which always causes some discarnation, that our public land managers, were nervous. And so we did a post about just thanking them. And then 2 days later is when, this big firing happened. And so we got that out in front of people on the socials, in particular. And I think, we're brand new, but we had a video seen by like 20,000 people, which,
Okay.
that's like, there's people that have way bigger followings than us. But I think we're getting out trying to tell the story so people know what's going on. And then that can, that's one of the night. I hate social media in so many ways. But one of the best things about social media is you can spread information very
Very
fast.
quickly.
Yep,
Yeah. Do you follow ours?
I do.
Okay. Yeah. It's a nice tool for that for sure. Um, so that's the way you're operating right now is you're doing research on things going on in government and making people aware of it.
Yep. And that's like, again, like I've been in the game for 25 years. So I have a lot of relationships with people that will either share information with me or I can ask them about things. And then we try to report that out.
Okay. Okay. That's really good stuff. And if there's ever anything that you think that there should be attention brought to, please let me know, and I'd be glad to share it through our little channel as well.
I appreciate that. I mean, I think I said it already, Matt, but like, democracy is still run by the people if we decide to like show up. And that might not happen like right away, but I can give you lots of examples. I mean, that Chaffetz, example in 2017, he introduced that bill and a week later he took his name off of it because he got his ass kicked.
Yeah.
Like, on multiple levels.
Yes.
So like that is the lever that we the people have. And so I think, if is trying to again get information out to people and then give them an opportunity to engage. And if you do that, you're not going to win all these things, but you're going to win some of them and, hopefully create a tide that is something different than we have right now.
I just don't. The one thing is like, how do you combat apathy? Like, there's just
people ask me like all the time, Matt, like what's the number one issue facing, sportsmen and women across the country, hunters and anglers across the country? And I always say apathy because it is the worst. It is the worst. You already said 90% of the people don't belong to a conservation organization, like that are in the hunting and fishing world. Like that's kind of embarrassing to me, right? In some ways. And so how do you combat that? I don't know. I think shit's got to get really bad.
yeah.
Before people
I'll
really
agree
start
with
paying
that.
attention.
I'll agree with that. But
And
it leads to this bifurcation where it's got to just get horrible until you fight, and then you bring it back, and or maybe you have some victories, and then you become apathetic again. It's just
I think it's a cycle. It's a cycle for sure.
I wish the human psyche was such that it was always just a moderate level of sustained effort. You know?
I will tell you that that's exhausting. I've done it for
Yeah,
20
yeah,
years. But
yeah.
I think it's natural. But yeah, I mean, I wish that one, we all play defense because that's what happens when shit's real bad is you start playing defense. But then once you kind of build that coalition, how do you transition into some offensive stuff? Like I think we've talked about a couple today. How do you increase, money for access? How could you potentially, combine, farm program payments into access? I mean, I just like, how do you be more proactive? I think, in the Land and Water Conservation Fund, there was a little bit of defense there. But then that was really a proactive campaign. But that took 20 plus years, Matt, to actually get full and dedicated funding for the Land and Water Conservation, which is, now $900 million every single year for access and conservation, which is sick. But that took 20 years,
Yeah. And right now it just seems like it's not a proactive time. It's just entirely a reactive time.
Yeah. I mean, I think there's potentially some things that we could be proactive on, but yes, it's going to be defensive right now, and then how do you take that energy, into doing stuff proactively?
Yeah. Well, I really appreciate you taking the time. Is there anything else you want to mention?
I mean, man, I appreciate the time too. And I guess the thing I would leave listeners with is that every single time something bad has been happening in this country, there's been some good that came from that. And we talked about kind of like the timber barons back in the day that were raping and pillaging our forests. Then Roosevelt does, the forest reserves, which became, the national forest system. At that same time, we were, you know, killing wildlife to put food on tables and feathers in women's hats. And what do we get? We got the Lacey Act that said you can't sell wildlife anymore, right? And so that was like established kind of that big tenet of the North American model. Then you go to the Dust Bowl and the lid's coming off the prairie. And like you get Pittman Robertson, you get the Duck Stamp, you get the National Wildlife Federation, you get Ducks Unlimited, you get um, the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service. Like out of that really bad came some good. Then you go, let's say, into the 60s, where Rachel Carson writes the book Silent Spring, and it's about rivers on freaking fire, right? Like these rivers were on fire because they were so polluted. And so what do we get out of that? And that's a bad times, right? We're kicking the shit out of our rivers in particular. You get clean air, you get clean water, you get the Land and Water Conservation Fund, you get the Wilderness Act, you get the Endangered Species Act. And by the way, these things are being passed like 98-2. And so I bring up that history. When I say 98-2, that's in the Senate. And the majority of those, just overwhelmingly bipartisanly supported, is that out of some like pressure and some bad things, I think people can coalesce and we can come together for some good things. Do I know exactly what those good things are right now? No. But I think we are entering a time where there's more pressure on our public lands, our public waters, and our public wildlife than we've ever had. And I gotta think that glass half full, that's going to bring the people together and we're going to be able to come together and do some great things for conservation.
Well, I hope you're right. Another example is like I got a hernia and I learned a little bit about human anatomy from it.
Okay.
You know, for every bad thing.
I love that analogy. I'm sorry that you had the hernia. Those things are a pain in the butt, as I've heard. I've never had one.
Yeah.
What'd you learn from the stuff in the ear?
Oh, I just have a better sense of like just how the GI tract works. I haven't done anything about it, but
it's still in there.
Yeah, I still have it.
Okay.
I've flirted with getting surgery, but the recovery is so long, so I'm not going to do anything until it gets bad enough. It was a stupid joke. I'm not going to do anything until it gets to the point where it's like really uncomfortable. It's about as big as a mouse, like for your computer.
Okay, got it. Got it.
That was a stupid joke. I take it back. You were trying to leave us with this impassioned, like out of every bad thing comes a good thing.
Then you go to the hernia. Let me leave you with one more, so we have a clue.
I'll probably follow it up with some other dumb
thing. But that's I guess like your prerogative. And I'll just keep on trying to inspire. But I would say that a lot of people, don't think their voice counts right now in America, and they're like the overwhelmingly, pressure from the greediness and the billionaires feels like overwhelming. And again, democracy is run by those that show up. We need to use our voices, show up, even if you think you can't make a difference. All of us collectively can. But if you don't use your voice, you're definitely not going to be heard. So I would tell people that start using your voice as much as possible.
Awesome. And so if people want to interact with you and see what you're finding, the best way is what, Facebook and Instagram?
Instagram is probably the best, or our website. So it's americanhunters.org or nolandgrab.com, which I freaking love that we got that.
Oh.
And then on Instagram, it's just American Hunters and Anglers.
All right. Okay. I'm going to go give you a follow right now. And I'm glad you're doing what you're doing. I think it's got a lot of potential for doing good things. So
thanks, Matt. We have a lot of opportunity in front of us, and the time is now to get engaged.
All right. Have a good night. Thanks.
You as well, man.
Bye.